I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but I'm wondering if I asked you to raise your hands and ask how many of you consider yourself to be law-abiding citizens, my guess is that most of you would raise your hands because you like to perceive yourself as law-abiding citizens. It's the thing to do. We know that we need laws. We can't have a society that's ordered without some kind of constructive laws that tell us what we can and can't do. What are the limits of which we can operate? Yeah, we're law-abiding citizens. But then we realize that there's all too many laws. We probably don't realize that when your alarm goes off in the morning, if you use an alarm, there are probably about 1,100 federal laws that govern what you're going to do at that moment, the moment you wake up in the morning. And then we understand that sometimes there's laws that we have that seem to have unfortunate consequences, that are made with good intentions, with certain goals in mind, and they turn out to have a negative effect. I guess one of the examples of this is the laws that govern people when they get out of serving some kind of sentence in a prison. After being in the chaplaincy in a prison for a while, one of the things I understood, the hardest things of recovery after you were released, was being able to get a job because there were so many things that were prohibited. The state of Ohio, for instance, has 450 laws that govern what you can and can't do once you leave prison. For instance, you cannot operate a racetrack. Well, that stands to reason, doesn't it? Maybe. But you can also cut hair. Well, if they have to worry about you cutting hair and what you would not do with the scissors, maybe they shouldn't have let you out in the first place. You can't provide hospice care. You can't deal with somebody who is in the process of dying. You can't deal in livestock. You can't broker real estate. You can't get a license to repair an air conditioner. And the list goes on, 450 of them, which leads to a lot of unemployment. And unemployment, of course, leads to more crime. I was kind of surprised that being a used car salesman wasn't included in that, but I've served that time, not in prison, but as a used car salesman, and I don't see where it would hurt to have somebody who had been incarcerated sell cars. Sometimes it's called the Cobra effect. The Cobra effect comes from a law that was passed in India hundreds of years ago when they had a cobra epidemic. There were so many of these poisonous snakes around, it was rampant, and there were so many people dying from cobra bites that they passed a law on giving money to those people who brought in cobras dead. They would bring them in, present their bodies, and they got paid, and the payment was very good. In the community I grew up, that was rattlesnakes. And a lot of people made their living just on killing rattlesnakes and bringing it in. But one of the things that happened in India is there got to be a very flourishing cobra raising trade. The value in turning in dead cobras was so great that there would be cobra farms that would be set up to raise cobras in which they could give to somebody and they could make a profit on the cobra that they brought in. And before the law was abolished, the last year the law reigned, was the greatest cobra epidemic ever in India. See, this is the law of unintended consequences. We got to be careful of how we deal with the law. Now, our gospel text this morning is dealing with the laws in the Old Testament. And Jesus is preaching in the Sermon on the Mount, his first presentation. And so all these people of Israel are coming to hear Jesus, meaning he's healing, he's raising the dead, he's preaching, and he's got a tremendous following. What they're interested in is what is he saying about the law? because there were basically four types of people in his day, and they were all kind of separated on how they responded to the law. The first were the Pharisees, want to observe all those laws, those 632 laws, to the letter of the law. Those were the Pharisees. The Sadducees said we need to reinterpret the laws because they change from time to time, and what is good for Moses and Abraham probably isn't relevant anymore. We've got those people today too, right? Then there were the Essenes. They said, we just want to get away from the law, so we're going to put ourselves in a separate community where we don't have to worry about laws. We don't need laws because we're a special community and we're separated from the rest of the world. We don't need the law. And then there were the Zealots, who said the law is all bad. And what we do is got to get rid of these people that are occupying our country, get rid of their laws and put in our own. All the laws that they created are bad, and most of them from the old times are stupid anyway. So, Jesus, what are you going to say about the law? Well, when you read the New Testament lesson today from the Sermon on the Mount, it sounds like Jesus is an ultra-right winger. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law of the prophets. I come not to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth shall pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Wow. And just after Jesus says this, he goes out and he is accused of breaking the laws. You're healing on Sabbath. You can't do that. Jesus said, what do you mean? I can't do that. If you have a horse or a cow and it falls into a pit on Sunday or on the Sabbath, you don't pull it out? Well, that doesn't make any sense. That's not the law of love. And then he went on and explained other things. And he's accused of just totally not paying any attention to the law. Well, Jesus thought the law was important. But how did he interpret it? That's what's important for us to know today. First of all, Jesus says the law is the way that brings you in relationship with God. It's a protective love law. When people came and asked him, what is the greatest law of these that we present to you? Which one? He said, the greatest law is this: you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your mind and all your self and all your spirit, and your neighbor as yourself. Everything else is superficial compared to these. And every wall you got to weigh in terms of this great commandment. Now, a mother has laws for children. You tell the children not to touch the hot stove because they'll burn their hand. That's a good law. My daughter, if you ask her, and you ask her, did your dad ever spank you? She'll say, one time. One time. When was that? Well, the road outside our house, I ran out and just about got hit by a car. And my dad spanked me. Well, I understood that that wasn't the best thing to do. You do tell your children and give them laws in order to help them get through some of the critical years of their life. Now, Mark Twain said, if your child wants to grab the tail of a cat, just let him. Don't prohibit him. Because once they grab the tail of the cat, they'll learn never to do it again. Well, you can't do that as a mother, because the cat might destroy the baby. Can't put your hand on the oven or the stove because it'll cripple you. The laws protect. Martin Luther said, the law shows us the way to God and shows how far we are from the ideal of what God is. It's not some kind of ecclesiastical scoreboard in heaven where Jesus is marking down when you break the law and when you don't break the law. It's there to protect you and to give you a purpose. But the leaders replace the relationship with absolute obedience to some written law. Can't do that. But the law is there for a purpose. And it gives you a structure within which to live if you want to follow God's plans. The second thing that Jesus said is the relationship with God helps understand the purpose of the law. The purpose of the law is rooted in love and freedom. It's rooted in love and freedom. That's the purpose of the law. It's a whole lot of difference between whether we obey the law because it's something structured and it bears down on us and we feel it's trying to deprive us of some enjoyment, and whether we do something simply because we know it's the loving thing to do. There was a woman who was in an abusive relationship with her husband. One of the things that he had was a list of things that a dutiful wife would do. 25 things that she had to adhere to or receive punishment. No, you can't get that list right now. But she disobeyed laws, and she was punished for it very harshly. And finally, with the help of other people, she was able to remove herself from that relationship. She remarried again to someone who loved her intensely. And she said, "What are your rules? What are your laws for marriage?" And he said, "There are none. Just love me." She found a real loving relationship. And one of the things that she said was that she was cleaning house one day and she ran across the list of all the things that her first husband had given her that must be obeyed absolutely. And she said, "You know what the surprising thing was? I was obeying all these laws, but it was because I loved them, and those were the things that you do if you love somebody." A whole different approach. And that's what God is telling you. These aren't laws to strangle you and to forbid you from having fun. It's what you do if you operate out of a context of love in terms of yourself, others, and God. But the third thing he said about the law is the most important. And that is this. And listen real closely, because this is the message we preach on Sunday, no matter what church we are. If you come to God and say, "I didn't meet the requirements of the law," he says, "Don't worry about it. I've got it covered." That's the gospel message today. That's the gospel. Because if we come to God, we have to admit, as we look in his rule book, we didn't obey all the laws. Many times we suffered for breaking them, not because it was some divine wrath, but because things don't work as well when you disobey these rules. But that's the message of the law from Jesus. Yeah, they are important. I'm not going to remove any of them. They're there for a purpose, to show a relationship with God. But the basis for the law is to give you love and freedom. But the third is most important, is that if you break them, I got you covered. Amen.